We are so pleased to introduce our guest speaker today. Ginny Dietrich is the founder and CEO of Armet Dietrich, a Chicago-based integrated marketing communications firm. She's a lead blogger at PR and marketing blog Spin Sucks, co-author of Marketing in the Round, and co-host of Inside PR, a weekly podcast about communications and social media. And her second book, Spin Sucks, is due out in January 2014. We're so pleased to have her with us because as small and mid-sized businesses know, trying to figure out how to utilize and leverage social media is very challenging for us. And there is an opportunity here for us to better understand how to do this, for not only to communicate with our customers, but communicate with our customers' customers who are the operators. In B2B environments, obviously, social media can be challenging. We know that our customers utilize social media quite frequently, but we're hoping that Jeannie will give us some input as to how to leverage it within our own organization. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Jeannie Dietrich, and she's going to take us through a webinar, which is a presentation that she's provided to us, and then we'll take questions afterwards. So Jeannie?
That sounds good. Thank you, thank you. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm just getting over a really bad chest cold and I still have a cough. So if I go silent all of a sudden, it's because I put my phone on mute to cough, but I'm going to try to get through this next hour without having to do that. But if that happens, that's why, so I'm not coughing in your ear. Just a quick refresher, I want to go through a few things just from a social media and internet perspective just to set the foundation, and then we'll get into where we are and where you can take this from here. The internet population probably is no surprise to anybody. In the last 5 years there's been a two-time increase. What's interesting to note is that most people, especially outside of North America, are accessing the web in ways that we don't necessarily. I think laptops are still number one for us. Laptops and desktops are still number one for us, and then phones, and then tablets. And you see a big shift in internet use around the world in other ways, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There were 529 trillion emails sent on the internet last year, and I like to use this statistic because we all get really excited about the new shiny tool. You know, what's Google Plus and what's Instagram and what's Snapchat and what's Pinterest and what are all these new tools, but we forget everybody has email. And so one of the things that we talk about is, yeah, it's great to be on Pinterest and it's great to be on Facebook and it's great to be on Twitter and it's great to be on LinkedIn if that's where your customers and your prospects are participating, but for B2B organizations, probably not. And I'll show you some stats that will help you determine where you should be participating. But I want you to think about email as an avenue to get to those customers because everybody uses email right now. That may change in the next 5 years, but right now everybody uses email. There are 1 billion active Facebook users, and I think Facebook uses the term active as it determines a person logs on once a week. They may not necessarily update their statuses, but they're stalking kids, they're stalking grandkids, they're looking at what friends are doing, but they're not necessarily participating in conversations, so that's what they count as active. There are 158 million blogs on the internet, and what's interesting to note is, about half of those, or maybe even more, are dead because blogging is very, very, very difficult. It's very time intense. It's very hard to keep consistency. It's very, very hard to create new content all the time. And so people start blogs, companies start blogs, and then they don't see an immediate return on investment and stop about 6 months or 9 months into the process. And it actually takes a lot longer than that to see any success. So I would venture to guess that at least half of those are dead. Last year there were 124 billion tweets sent on Twitter. And just to put that in perspective, in 2010 there were 25 billion, and in 2011 there were 75 billion. So it's more than doubling every year just in terms of how many tweets are sent and how much people are using Twitter as a communications tool. More than 4 billion videos are streamed on YouTube every single day, which I find fascinating. It's just fascinating to me that many videos will be uploaded and streamed every single day. And I think the reason, I don't have anything to support this, but my educated guess is that 65% of us are visual learners. And so I think the reason that that many videos are watched, of course, other than the typical viral videos and cat videos and things like that, but I think the reason that that many videos are streamed is because we tend to, the majority of us tend to need to see something in order to understand how it works. And people are going to YouTube now to learn how to do things. You know, my favorite one is you can actually go and figure out how to pick a lock or hotwire a car, which is interesting if you want to do that. So there's all sorts of things that you can do on YouTube, and I think that that's probably the reason that that's such a successful search engine is because so many of us are visual learners. On LinkedIn, 187 million LinkedIn users, and we'll talk about LinkedIn from a B2B perspective because it tends to be one of the most successful social networks, so we will come back to that. There are 25 million Pinterest users, and Pinterest, for those of you who don't know, is what I'll call an online scrapbook. So it allows you to pin images of things that you like or would like to buy eventually, or create your own wish list. From a business perspective, if you have something visual to show, and probably if you're reaching consumers, which most of you are not, it's just an interesting way to drive traffic, and also an interesting way to, if you sell something online, to drive e-commerce sales. So I just use that as a quick example so that you understand what Pinterest is and why it's out there, but it's typically used mostly for retail organizations, food from a recipe standpoint, so if you are from a food standpoint or working with consumers, but from a B2B perspective, not very useful. 100 million Instagram users. So Instagram, everybody has on their smartphone if they have an iPhone or an Android. And what it does is it creates the ability to add photos and filters on, borders or filters on your photos and make photos really interesting. So it's almost, you can grayscale them, you can make them black and white. So it's almost as if you're a professional photographer within your phone. And it in and of itself has become its own social network but it's all image-based and video-based. So you don't have any status updates like you would on LinkedIn or Facebook, but you still have the conversation happening on the social network where people can say, oh, that's a really cool photo, or whatever happens. This next statistic is really, really interesting because there are only 7 billion people in the world, and 6 billion people have mobile phones. Now, not necessarily smartphones, but I mentioned the internet use globally, and what's really interesting is most of the countries, especially Asia and Africa, are using their phones to get on the internet. And so they're not using tablets or computers, they're using their phones, and that's how they're keeping up with what's happening around the world, and it's through the smartphone. So it's really interesting to think that 6 billion people have a mobile phone that they're using to get on the internet, and what does that mean to us as business owners, and really be thinking about how do we use the web from a mobile perspective to reach our customers and our prospects. What's happening is this is fundamentally changing the way that we communicate. One of my favorite things to ask, and I can't ask this because I can't see you, but one of my favorite things to ask people when I speak in person is, how many of you still get the newspaper at home? And typically what happens is about 10% of the audience raises their hand. And then I say, okay, for you people that still get the newspaper at home, how many of you actually read it? And most of the hands go down. There's usually 1 or 2 hands that stay up, but most of the hands go down. And it's really interesting that people just are not willing to give up their print subscription yet, even though they get their news online every single day. They're just not willing to give that up quite yet. So it's fundamentally changing the way that we communicate. And what's interesting is it's less about the social media tools and the shiny new tool and what's there, and more about how do we communicate and connect with our customers in new and interesting ways. So it's been really fascinating to watch over the last, I'd say, 4 years. I think Twitter became a household name. I think it was 2009 when the plane went down in the Hudson River. And the reason it became a household name is because a guy was on the ferry in the Hudson River, and he took a picture of the plane from his phone, his iPhone 3, very first generation iPhone, took a picture of it, and he posted it to Twitter. And his tweet said something like, plane in the Hudson River going to pick up the people crazy, and then you could click on a link and see the picture of the plane in the Hudson River. What happened is the news media, because that was happening in real time, and the news media, it took them almost an hour to get down there and get the satellites and get the story and interviews and all that and get it uploaded and back onto the air. They were using that photo from this guy's tweet in their news stories to stay up in real-time communication. So you're seeing that, and now you'll, of course, see across the bottom of CNN and Fox. This is being reported on Twitter. We haven't confirmed it yet. But citizen journalism is becoming, that's what we call citizen journalism, is becoming a new way of communicating. And so what happens is your customers and your prospects may use the phone, they may use email, and they may go to the social networks to see if they can connect with you in a way, in that way somehow, because it's easier for them. So you really want to be thinking about, as a business owner, where do I need to communicate? Where do I need to have a presence so that my customers and prospects can contact me? And in the beginning, we all had 1-800 numbers, and now, of course, we have email addresses and contact us forms and all that. So it's just another way for people to be able to communicate with us. So, excuse me, I like to use this social media explained just to show you in very childish terms how the social networks work. Of course, you have Foursquare, which is location-based, so you can check into a location, and this is where YouTube is, look at this piece, so it's just kind of a childish, funny thing. So let me just talk about the different social networks from the perspective of how you can use them in your business. Most of the work that we do is B2B, so I'm very, very familiar with how this all applies to an organization that doesn't work with the mass consumer. One of the things that you need to be thinking about, especially as Google continues to update its algorithms and really change the way they present information in search results, is your website has to become about the customer. So when websites came out, we were all about, let's get our corporate brochure up there, let's talk about us, our leadership, our history, the products that we sell, and that's it. Well, now Google wants to know that you have created, you're creating new content on your website at least once a week. And if you're creating new content on your website, they're going to increase your search rankings because you are creating this opportunity for people to come to your site over and over and over again because there's new information there. So the website becomes about the customer. But we have to have a way to still talk about ourselves and what we do and our history and our leadership and our team and all those kinds of things. Facebook is a great way to do that. Now, sorry. I will tell you that from a B2B perspective, Facebook is not necessarily the #1 place you should go. If you're going to look at it and you need to prioritize, I will tell you that LinkedIn is the #1 place you should prioritize. That said, Facebook allows you to interact with your customers and your prospects, but also tell your story. And what I find really interesting is you see over here on the side where it says now, June 2012, 2011, and goes all the way down through the 1900s, 1800s, and founded, right there on the right-hand side. What the New York Times has done is when you click on any of those years, you can see their history in photos. So one of my favorite ones is to click on 1960s, and you can see there's a photo of them all sitting in the newsroom at the New York Times waiting to hear the news of where Bobby Kennedy's status after he'd been shot. So it's really this really rich history. And if you click on Founded, you see the very first cover of the very first New York Daily Times, which was founded in 1851. And they say, we publish today the very first issue of the New York Daily Times, and we intend to issue it every morning, Sundays accepted, which is funny, for an indefinite number of years to come. And you can also see below the masthead where it says New York Daily Times, it says price 1 cent. So it's a really interesting look at where they started and where they've come. And not all of us have this rich history and photos to show our history like the New York Times does. But what you can think about is there's a company in Atlanta that did this. They opened in 1964, and one of the things they've done in the timeline on Facebook is they've shown all of their print ads throughout the year. So if you click on 1970, you can see all of the print ads that they had in the 70s. If you click on the 90s, you can see all the print ads they had in the 90s. And it's just a really rich way of showing your history. And then, of course, you can copy that and put it on your website under the About Us, because even though your website is about the customer, there's still that About Us section where you can do some of this stuff. Now, Twitter. I want you to think about Twitter less as I don't understand why I care about what people have to eat, and more about a networking event. So we all go to networking events. We all have that moment where we're talking to what I call the type OO, the output only person, where all they do is talk about themselves, and you're just like trying to figure out a way to get away from that. We all have those experiences. The good thing about Twitter is when you have that experience, you can block that person or you can ignore that person. You don't have to find a way to escape that person in real life. And so when you think about Twitter as a networking event and less about what so-and-so had for lunch or the celebrities that are tweeting about Miley Cyrus twerking, you can really drill down into finding people to do business with. So I like to use the example of when I started on Twitter in 2008. I'm a Vistage member, and Vistage is a CEO membership organization. So I went through and I did a search just in the Twitter search bar for anybody that had Vistage in their bio, in their Twitter bio, or mentioned Vistage online in their tweets. And so what I discovered is at the time there were about 107 people that either mentioned Vistage or had Vistage in their bio. And because I'm a Vistage member, I was able to connect with them. So we had something in common. So I would introduce myself. I'm a Vistage member in Chicago. I see you're a Vistage member in Baltimore. How cool is that? Who's your chair? I would find ways to have a conversation with people. And because of that, we've gotten clients. I've done speaking engagements. I've traveled internationally to do speaking for Vistage groups internationally. So there's a way for you to use Twitter not as a marketing tool necessarily, but as a networking business development tool. LinkedIn company pages provide thought leadership opportunities. And what people don't realize is LinkedIn about, I want to say 6 months ago, and I'm not entirely positive on the timing, but I think it was about 6 months ago, came out with company pages. And so you can now create a page for your company that people can follow. Just like you have a fan page on Facebook that people can like, you now can have a company page on LinkedIn that people can follow. And this is where, while some of you may have groups and some of you have your personal pages, the company page allows you to have conversations around content that you're creating or new products or even jobs that you have open. But it allows you to have conversations and open up your network so that you don't have to have that first or second connection in order to be able to get that, to have that connection. You can do it through your company page where anybody can follow your page. So now you have access to your third and fourth and fifth connections without having to have their email address or figure out a way that you've worked together. So it's a really interesting way to develop and build your brand from a thought leadership perspective on LinkedIn. And in a few minutes, I'll show you some stats that show from a B2B perspective, LinkedIn is the place you want to be. sorry. YouTube creates an in-person experience. And just like TV and movies do, I'm sure that you've all had an experience where you feel like you know a celebrity because they're in your home once a week or because you've seen all of their movies. And if they're a good actor, you don't know them at all. You just know the characters that they play. But we all, as human beings, feel like we know that person. Well, now you can take that human nature and apply it to your business. And you can say, okay, let's show them the manufacturing floor and do it in an interesting way through video. Or let's answer questions that customers have, and let's do it on video. Let's get customer testimonials on video. Again, 65% of us are visual learners. So when we have an opportunity to show our customers and prospects what we do, it's much, much more interesting than text. So really figure out a way to create that in-person experience. As we're going More organizations are going virtual, and we're doing work around the globe. It's really important to be able to say, oh, I see. I don't get to see Ginny every day. I only see her once a quarter because she only comes to China once a quarter. Now I can see her once a week through her videos. And so it creates that in-person experience where it makes people feel more connected to you. And when people feel more connected to you, remember, people buy from people. They don't buy from organizations. So it's a way to create that. And then again, Pinterest, I love Pinterest because it's such a visual thing. And if you have something visual to show and you're just trying to drive traffic to your website, which is good from a B2B perspective, use images to do that. 70% of users buy because of Pinterest inspiration. So if you very well could have a decision maker at one of your customers' organizations who spends a lot of time on Pinterest and is like, oh, they're doing that. Now, if I were consulting with you and we were just looking at it from a strategic standpoint, I probably would not recommend Pinterest, but it's something to be thinking about. So HubSpot did, I'm just going to take a quick swig of water. HubSpot did a study of 1,000 business owners, and what they asked them was, if you create content in your business, so website content, ebooks, webinars like this one, white papers, newsletters, any kind of videos, any kind of content, do you see an increase in leads? And what they found from a B2B perspective was that yes, 67% of organizations that create more content or create content on a consistent basis have more leads. Now, I don't know about you, but I would love 67% more leads. And in fact, I use these tools, so yes, I have quite a few more leads. What then they asked, okay, so for those of you who create new consistent content and you are generating more leads, how many pieces of content do you create in order to generate that? And what they discovered was for the people creating new content one time a month, so they had one webinar a month and that was it, or they did one podcast a month and that was it, or they did one white paper a month and that was it, they saw an increase of their leads by 10%. If they were creating new content one time a week, they saw an increase in leads by 77%. So this is amazing. And you'll probably hear people talk about content is king and you have to create all this content and content this and content that. And remember the stat I showed you about 158 million blogs on the internet, but probably half of them are dead because content is really hard to create. You don't have to create content every day. If you create content once a month or twice a month, you're going to see an increase in your leads. If you create it once a week, that's ideal because you're going to see a huge jump from twice a month to 4 times a month. So just be thinking about that from that perspective is, how do we increase our leads? Because we're using the web and we're using email and we're using social media to generate new leads. And from a business-to-business perspective, this stuff really works. I mean, I started an email marketing campaign for our business 2 months ago, and we already have 5 new clients from it in 2 months just from email. So you really want to think about what kinds of content can we create that's valuable and educational and informational. Can we put it on video because so many of us are visual learners, and how do we distribute that? The next thing the HubSpot study asked was, are you using social media and have you acquired a customer from it? And you'll see that the company website or your company blog is the #1 customer acquisition tool. Then they broke it down from B2B to B2C, and probably it's not any big surprise that Facebook is #1 for a consumer business. But look how close your company blog or your company website and LinkedIn are for a B2B organization. So you have 45% for LinkedIn and 43% for your company website. That's pretty significant. So if you're trying to prioritize and figure out where you should be participating online, it's creating new content for your website, and it's doing LinkedIn. It's participating in groups in LinkedIn. It's having a company page on LinkedIn. It's networking through LinkedIn. It's using LinkedIn to help drive people to your website through your content. So you want to be thinking about how do we create new content on the website? And if your website is supposed to be about the customer, the very easiest way to get started is to go through your website, and I always make this joke and nobody ever laughs, but I'm going to make it anyway. I always say take the French out, the we, because you want to take out the we, the us, the ours, and turn it into the customer. So then it becomes you is a very active word because all of a sudden the prospect is reading your content or watching your videos, and you're talking to them specifically because you're using the word you or they or theirs. So really think about how to do that, and that's the best way to create new content on your website immediately. And then, of course, after you finish that project, which is going to take a little bit of time, then you start to think about how do we do webinars and how do we do videos and how do we do podcasts. You know, you don't have to go out and do it all at once, but be thinking about can we create new content one time a week. The other thing you want to be thinking about are calls to action. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see business-to-business organizations, especially small and mid-sized organizations, make is they do email marketing, they have newsletters, but there's no call to action. So they'll send a newsletter, and all of the information will be in that email. So they're not requiring people to click on a link that takes them to a website. They're not requiring people to click on a link inside the email that takes them to a landing page where they can then put in their information and download a white paper. So you want to have contextual calls to action. And what I have on the screen here is for those of you who can see, and I'll try to explain it for those of you who are just listening, there's on our blog on SpinSucks, if you go to the homepage, spinsucks.com, you'll see a subscribe button. You'll see follow SpinSucks on Twitter, which you can just click on that. You can just click on the like button to like us on Facebook. You can click on the Google Plus button to circle us on Google Plus. You can click on marketing in the round image so you can buy my book. You can listen to the podcast that we create every week. You can click and register for the webinar. So all of these calls to action are in the sidebar of our blog. There's lots of things for you to do, and that's what you want to be thinking about is how do we motivate people to do something so that we are collecting email addresses, because when we collect email addresses, we can then market to them. And that's how we're using social. We're creating new content on our website. We're taking that link and we're using that in the social media networks. So people have to click on that link, which brings them back to our website. And then you have two strategies. One is free, which is, okay, they get to have this blog post or this ebook for free. And you have paid. And the paid piece of it is not necessarily they're giving you money, but they're giving you an email address in exchange for it. So that's the bigger pieces of content, like a white paper that's more technical, or a longer video that's 6 minutes or longer versus a 1-minute video that you can just get on your website. So really be thinking about, from a strategic standpoint, how you're using the social media tools to bring people back to something that you own. So let me give you some case studies. As you're starting out, you really want to figure out what you're trying to achieve. And so when we were starting out with our blog, the blog has just celebrated its 7-year anniversary, but it had 3 years of ups and downs before we really figured out what we were doing, how search engine optimization worked, and how to monetize it. So in 2010, we hired a Northwestern University graduate student for his internship for the summer. He was our community resident. And he said, okay, his job was to help us build the SpinSucks brand from a blogging perspective. And so his very first day, we sat down and we tried to determine what their goals were. And we only had goals for 75 days. And I like to show these because it shows you that you have to start somewhere and you have to create a benchmark. So we had no idea. And the reason that we wanted to increase traffic by 36% instead of like 30% or 35% is because we wanted to get to 10,000 visitors per month. And what we discovered then was that I think we were at like 7,500 visitors per month or something like that. So in order to get to 10,000, we had to increase it by 36%. So that's why the numbers are weird. But you'll notice that because we didn't really know if we could monetize it, we didn't really know what we were trying to achieve. We knew that we could use it as a really big brand awareness tool and a thought leadership tool, but we didn't know if we could make money from it. So you'll notice that the monetization piece of it is missing. Because those first 75 days, we were just creating a benchmark. And then from there, we created the opportunity to monetize. So we actually sell webinars, we sell content, and we also give content away for free. So now we're able to monetize what we do from the blog, and that way I can actually have people full-time on it, which took us years and years and years to get to. So I use that as an example just to show you that you have to create a benchmark, and it doesn't have to be for a year. It can be for 60 days. It can be 30 days. It can be, we did it for 75 so that we had time to review it before his 90-day internship was up. A client of ours, Bill Prettyman, is a business owner in Atlanta, and it's an interesting business. It's third generation, and he and his brother share the CEO title, which if any of you are in a family business, I'm sure you understand that that's kind of difficult, probably being nice. So in 2010, he came to us and he said, I would really like to start blogging. I need your help. I don't know what kinds of content to create. But my main goal is to build my personal brand outside of the business because I want to give back to my industry, but I want to do it, without having the family business as my read-in. I want to do it for myself. And so we built the blog, thoughts on print industry leadership. So really his goal was to build his personal brand as a leader in the print distribution industry, and he didn't want to monetize it, which at the time I was kind of like, okay, you want to pay us, but you don't want a monetary return on investment. And he said, no, but you know what I do want is I want to build this brand, my personal brand, big enough that I will be invited to serve on the board, and I'd eventually like to become president of the trade organization. And I'd also like to develop a social network for the industry so that they understand that print distribution isn't dying, it's just evolving. And how do we get my competitors and my peers online so the industry doesn't die? So in fact, the blog did do that for him. He's immediate past president this year, so he was president last year. And he did develop a social network that is a very vibrant community where they all share ideas. And it's really interesting to watch because lots of people who compete participate in the social network community, but they're sharing best practices and things like that where it's allowing the industry to thrive versus completely die. An environmental company on the East Coast, I think there were about 12 or 13 people in 2011, and they sat down and they said, okay, where do we have expertise? And what they discovered is that yes, we are an environmental company. Yes, we clean up groundwater. Yes, we take asbestos out of your buildings. Yes, we do those kinds of environmental things. But we have expertise in 11 different topics: higher education, healthcare services, career center, health and wellness and safety, etc. So they sat down and they said, okay, of the 12 of us, who has expertise in healthcare services? You're in charge of that topic. You're in charge of higher ed, you're in charge of environmental, you're in charge of engineering, you're in charge of compliance. And everybody took a turn writing content for their topic probably about twice a month, 1.5 times a month because I think there are 21 or 22 work days in a month. So, you might end up being twice a month and you might end up being once a month. But what they discovered, what they did is they didn't try to go out and get on all the social networks and do all these things. They generated $1.2 million in revenue. And the way they did this is they created new content. So each of them was writing only once or twice a month. And they used LinkedIn to promote that content and drive people back to their website. So they said, okay, I'm going to join a group on healthcare services, and I'm going to participate in that group, and I'm going to have conversations in that group. And then when it's my turn to write content, I'm going to post that link in my group. But because I'm having conversations the other 20 days of the month around other things in healthcare services that have to do with environmental issues, and I'm not promoting my business, it's okay, for once or twice a month to have me promote my content. So they put that in there. They would, write a little description to motivate people to start a conversation and have a conversation and link back to the blog post. And, what happened is they began to rise in search engine rankings just inside LinkedIn. So if you Googled, or not Googled, if you searched in LinkedIn healthcare services environmental, they would pop up because they created this brand awareness inside LinkedIn. And then they started to track it through their Google Analytics on how much they were actually generating in revenue. And they discovered $1.2 million in revenue. So when you're thinking about, oh my gosh, where do I do this? And this sounds like a lot of work. When you're tracking back to specific metrics that show your return on investment, I think you'd be pretty surprised. And then my last case study is a young man. They call him a young man because he's my age. Owns a pool company in Maryland. And this has nothing to do with your industry, but I like to use him as an example because this absolutely positively works for any industry anywhere. So in 2008, when the economy tanked, of course, his business was going out of business because nobody has disposable income to put in a swimming pool. And he was watching his competitors go out of business. And he is the breadwinner. His wife works inside the home. He has 4 kids. And he has little mouths to feed. So going out of business was not an option for him. What he did is he sat down and he did a lot of research, and he sat down with his sales team and he said to them, and all of you can do this, what are the questions that we get over and over and over again when we're sitting across the table from a prospect? And what they discovered was things like, what's the difference between an in-ground and an above-ground swimming pool? Do I want concrete? Do I want plexiglass? Do I want, I don't know, I'm not a pool expert. But he found that there were lots of questions that people asked over and over and over again. And when people ask those questions of you in meetings, when you're meeting with a prospect, you can be darn sure that they're also searching for it. So if you create content around the questions that you get over and over and over again, people are searching that online before they're meeting with you, and you're going to pop up. And what that does is provides credibility for you as an organization, because not only are you popping up in the search results, but you're also having a conversation in person, and those two things are matching. And what that does is it adds that layer of credibility so that, they do know what they're talking about. And in fact, when I Google them, they keep popping up in search results around these topics, which means to us as human beings that they must know what they're talking about. So what Marcus did is he created content around those questions, and he used the social networks only to push that content out so that he could bring people back, and it built his network larger than he had himself. And what he said is it reduced his advertising cost by 70%. So he was doing both radio and Yellow Pages. Of course, Yellow Pages was a no-brainer. He could get rid of that. But he reduced his advertising spend by 70%. It increased his website traffic by 300%, which, I'll be honest, is kind of a vanity metric. Traffic isn't a great thing, but you do want to see an increase in traffic. But what's important is his organic leads. So people that were emailing him or tweeting him or connecting with him on LinkedIn or using the Contact Us form on his website, those leads increased by 400%. 400%. Just by creating content around the questions that people ask you in your sales meetings. So I like to use that as an example because it's something that every single one of us can do. It's one of the things you want to think about is using the word versus. So a good example is, like, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between PR and advertising? So I say PR versus advertising or PR versus marketing because that's what people search for. And so you can think about using that word versus in your content as well, and that becomes the title of your blog post or your ebook or your webinar or whatever it is that you're putting online. So that is in your URL. and that's how people can find you. So I only have a few more minutes, so I want to quickly go through how you get started. This is a really good map of how you should be doing. You listen to the conversation that's happening online. You assess the conversation. Then you begin to engage. So you're not going to go out on Twitter and be like, here I am, everyone, woohoo! You measure your results, and then you improve. So you're going to tweak. You're going to, change things. Some things will work. Some things won't. You have to take some risk and really work things out. The best way to listen is to use what I will call Google alerts. Google, if you already have Google Alerts set up, you're going to want to switch them to what's called TalkWalker alerts because Google is sunsetting their alerts piece. Both of them are free. What you do is you put in your search terms, so your company name, your competitors' names, your industry, and then you can say, under type, you can say everything because you want it to be everything. You want web, you want blogs, you want the social networks. You can either say once a day or as it happens. I like to do it once a day so I'm not getting emails all day long. And then you put in your email and you create the alert. And what happens is you get an email that looks like this. So this is for my name, and it breaks it down into one email. So I don't get a whole bunch of different emails anytime anybody mentions my name online, but it gets broken down. So they have news at the top and where my name is mentioned in the news. Then they have blogs and where my name is mentioned in blogs, and then they have the web in general. And under the web will be the social networks, will be other blogs. There's lots of, that's sort of the generalization. So it breaks it down for you. And then you can start to see, okay, it looks like people are talking about us on Twitter and on other blogs. So it makes sense then for me to be thinking about, should I be participating on Twitter or should I be participating on LinkedIn? It's going to be different for every organization, which is why you have to spend the time in that listen phase. That listen phase could be 2 weeks. It could be 30 days. We always recommend with new clients we do 60 days so that we're really listening and getting enough information for 60 days that we can make a really educated recommendation. Oh, go back. And then you go into the assess phase. And this little tool is called FlipTop, fliptop.com. You can import your database into FlipTop, and it will spit out this pretty little chart, and it will tell you the people that you have email addresses for, where they are participating online. If you look at my chart, 20% of our people our prospects and our clients are on Twitter. So it probably makes sense for me. I see in my alerts that people are talking about us on Twitter, and I see in my FlipTop assessment that people are talking about us or people have Twitter accounts. So it probably makes sense for me and my business to participate on Twitter. You might get something completely different, and that's why you want to do this assessment phase. And then you get to engage. And really the content engagement piece of it is creating stories. It's creating stories about your company, it's creating stories about your employees, and it's creating stories about your customers. And when you can get those stories that are told from a customer or an employee perspective, you are going to win. It's pretty amazing. And if you can get it on video, remember 65% of us are visual learners. Get it on video if you can, because that's what humanizes the company. And of course, humanization creates kinship, and kinship is what drives purchase. And when you have purchase, then you get new stories. So when people say, well, I don't really know what kind of content to create, or I don't know, well, now you have, okay, so you have the website that you're changing. You're taking the French out of, the oui. You also have the list of questions that continues to grow from your meetings with prospects. And now you also have content that you can create around employees and customers. MailChimp, M-A-I-L-C-H-I-M-P, MailChimp, does a great job of telling their customer stories in video. If you go to their website, mailchimp.com, you can go and find their customer stories. And so their customers talk about themselves and how they use MailChimp in the business. And it's a really, really interesting way to think about telling your story. Then the last part, of course, is measuring your results. And Google Analytics continues to get better and better and better, and it's free. It gives you all of the metrics and all of the data you need to make really intelligent decisions. If you're not looking at your Google Analytics at least weekly as a business owner, I highly recommend that you do so because it gives you so much information. And if you don't understand what you're looking at, you can do one of two things. Find somebody who does understand it and have them educate you, or read Web Analytics an hour a day. Web Analytics an hour a day. It'll walk you through exactly what you should be looking for, how you do it. And then, of course, as you begin to understand it, you start to dig in there and you get better at it and you become more sophisticated with it. But it's really, really the best way to track what people are doing, what they're doing on your website, and where they came from and how long it took them to become a customer. And that's how you measure your results directly back to an ROI. And then, of course, you improve. So it used to be that it would take us a year to do a full campaign, and then we would spend another 6 months doing a market research campaign to figure out, is there aided awareness, is there brand unaided awareness, what do people think, are our trade organizations, do they know about us, are trade publications writing about us? So 18 months after you started a campaign, you knew whether or not it worked. Well, today, we know immediately whether or not something's working. So if you're paying attention to your metrics and your data, you know on a daily basis if something's working or if it's not. You know because you spent that first 30 or 60 days listening to the conversation and assessing the conversation, creating your benchmark of metrics and data. You know whether or not something's working immediately, and so you begin to tweak and improve. And with that, I will leave us with 10 minutes to answer questions. Mark, that go.
Great information, though, and I think it's something that so many of us small and mid-sized businesses have a hard time tackling, just trying to understand how to leverage that. There are so many tools and tricks that are unless you're listening to somebody who's done them, and that's why this presentation is so timely for our members. Unless you have somebody who can help you work through some of those details, it's very difficult to investigate how to leverage all of the different tools like you were talking about Google Analytics. So does anybody have any questions for Ginny?
No questions, but I just wanted to commend your presentation was very good.
Thank you.
Very insightful for us.
Good.
Hey, Ginny, this is Ray.
Hi, Ray.
First, I want to say thank you. The presentation was awesome. That is a lot of information to throw at us in a very short period of time.
I know, it's like the fire hose. I just opened it up for you.
I've actually had the opportunity and the pleasure to read your first book, Marketing in the Round.
Oh,
and
thank you.
for anybody on the call, if you want it's an easy read. It's also filled with some great information that you can implement immediately. But I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it yet, add it to your reading list, and there's lots of stuff that you can do immediately. My question for you, I did have one question on the different types of social media. You mentioned Pinterest and stuff like that. How do we, or what's an easy way for us to sort of build an integrated program where what we do on Facebook would roll over to Twitter, would roll over to LinkedIn? Is there an easy way of doing all of that stuff in 1 or 2 steps?
There is. You can use what's called a Hootsuite, H-O-O-T-S-W or S-U-I-T-E, Hootsuite. And it will allow you to very quickly with the click of a button update all of your social networks. So you can either write 140 character status updates in one, separate ones for each of your social networks in one window, or you can just use the same one and you click enter and it goes to all your networks.
Cool. Are there any other questions for Ginny?
I have to ask, how did you come up with your company name?
Which, Armin Dietrich or SpinSucks? You know, every time I say that when people ask me what I do for a living and I say PR, one of the first things that they say is, oh, you write for a living, or you're a spin doctor. And I'm like, no, I don't write for a living. So we were brainstorming one day. Actually, I think it was we were working late. And we were just kind of joking around, and we'd had a couple of glasses of wine at work. And we said, hey, man, this whole spin thing sucks. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, is it available? And it was. So there you go.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Ginny, for that. And everybody who's on the call again, we are going to publish this on our website. We are also going to send out a post communication for those who weren't able to join. Obviously, we know that a lot of our members wear multiple hats, so they are on the road. It's very difficult for them to dial in, but they do appreciate the information. As indicated earlier, several of them had reached out to me and asked for information after the call. So, Ginny, thank you. Ray,
you're welcome.
Your guidance as always, and Tracy and the team at IFMA, thanks for recording this. We appreciate everyone.
Ginny, I just want to say thank you, personal thanks. I know that your travel schedule has been incredibly busy. I know you're doing a lot of talking on the road, and really appreciate all the time and effort you put into this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Please stand